with us to get it rolling, a longtime friend of mine. I mean, this guy, we have gone back. I mean, I go back. I've been on the radio since 1995, and Howard Balzer has been a guest of mine probably since the late 90s. He covered the Rams for years in St. Louis. He's moved out to Arizona. He's covering the Cardinals. He's one of the great voices and great media members in National Football League history, and I really say that with total seriousness. And he's with us on the UMA guest line to preview the game on Sunday. Howard, how are you?
Larry, I'm doing great. Awesome to be with you. No question about that. And it's interesting. Jonathan Gannon was asked about if there's an advantage to the fact that it's going to be so hot in Santa Clara on Sunday. And he says, well, I've always believed you only have those who think they have an advantage just because they think they do. But I guess we'll see how it plays out. But I do have to tell you a quick funny story.
Sure.
Yesterday on one of the local radio stations, someone was saying, they said that, man, they're saying that this is going to be the hottest, the hottest game on record perhaps for the 49ers. And since they've, been at Levi's Stadium, of course.
Right.
So one of the hosts quickly Googles it, and he says, what are they talking about? It's only going to be 82 degrees in San Francisco. And I'm driving in my car, and I know, well, just because that's a little San Francisco on the bay is a bit different than Santa Clara. I didn't realize it was that much different, maybe 15 or 16 degrees, but they ended up looking pretty bad for saying that. And then I think somebody texted them or whatever and said, no, you got to check the Santa Clara temperature, not San Francisco. And then eventually they corrected themselves. So it was pretty funny.
Yeah. Do you think the Cardinals have an advantage because they do live in, ridiculously hot temperatures there in the desert? I mean, do you think, I don't know. I mean, I've always was told that, like the Bears had an advantage on the Niners when the Niners would go to Chicago because they live in Chicago and they're living in that cold. Do you think that you get used to 98 when you live in a climate like you see there in Tempe and Glendale?
Well, there's no question you get used to it, and I've been here now 4 years, and I still do laugh at the locals, though, of when it gets crazy, and it's been crazy hot here over the last week or so. It finally, like about 2 weeks ago, it finally got down for the first time since May 26th for a high under 100. And then when it was in the 90s, people were going, man, this is really nice, and people were calling it cool. I'm still one that says, no, it's just less hot. It's not cool. But then it started turning back, and it's been like in the 110, 112 this week. But you definitely do feel it when it's less. Now, I will say the Cardinals practice in the morning, and so even on those real hot days, it really doesn't get ungodly hot until 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And even though everyone jokes, well, it's a dry heat, there is a difference. There is a tremendous difference because you just don't have that disgusting feeling that you have in some parts of the country when it's hot and humid, and your skin crawls with that. And that I will say that does not happen here. It's just pure heat, no doubt about it. So you certainly get used to it. I don't think there's any doubt about it. And now, from what I understand, it might be a little bit humid on top of this. On top of the actual temperature Sunday. So who knows? But certainly the 49ers are there, and they're around there. And even though it's hotter than it normally is, certainly they've played in heat before. So I don't know how much of an impact that will truly have. But obviously both teams will be very cognizant of staying hydrated and making sure at certain positions, especially on the defensive line, that they keep a rotation of players, because where it can really start to have an impact, I think a lot of times is in the fourth quarter, where so many games in the league are decided. Now, will this game be up for grabs in the fourth quarter? Who knows? Judging by the way the Cardinals played last week, maybe not. Judging by the way the games went last year, maybe not. But as we know, it's a week-to-week league in the NFL, and what happens one week a lot of times has no bearing on what happens the next week.
We're talking to Howard Balzer from Cards Wire. He's a great follow on X, by the way, at HBalzer721 on X. Howard, it's like you can't tell the story of the NFL without you in the thing. I was watching an old draft thing on the NFL Network the other night. It was like whatever their, the top 10, this or that, and they were going back to a draft, and there you were sitting there next to Dr. Z on the draft coverage. I mean, Howard, what year did you start covering the National Football League?
I started covering the National Football League in 1976. And so when you add it up, this is my 49th year covering pro football. So obviously we know what that means for next year, God willing. So yeah, it was 76, and then really started, becoming a little bit known, I guess you could say, when I moved to St. Louis in 78 to work for the Sporting News, and started doing an NFL column there. And then when ESPN called to see if I was interested in coming on their first draft in 1980, it was pretty jarring. I mean, it was unexpected, but it was obviously humbling and very cool to be involved in that first one and do it for 9 years, the first 9 years of the telecast. And it's, now I'll get those calls, Larry, around the draft from around the country, people, saying, well, how has the draft changed? And are you surprised? And yeah, I mean, who could have expected it back then for the draft to get, to be what it was? And they asked me how it was with those early years. And it was, man, it was rudimentary. And, there weren't a lot of highlights because ESPN had just gotten on the air. And the one thing I always say is this. I mean, it was just the epitome of talking heads for that first draft with the people I was with in Bristol and then another crew in New York. And that was it. I mean, there weren't cameras at different teams or any of those things.
This is pre-Mel, huh? This is pre-Mel Kiper.
Yeah, this is pre-Mel. Yeah, this is pre-Mel Kiper. And so we didn't know how we did. We just know we got through it all that first year. We had no idea. Well, the reviews were solid. And the thing I always say, Larry, is, well, everyone thought enough of it to do it again the next year. And
seriously,
that was,
I'm so glad that we had a chance to catch up with you, or we're having this chance to catch up with you, because you are so much a pro football historian. Let's talk about the matchup this week. Kyler against the Niners, and what do you make of the year that Kyler's had? It's like he's only running 4 times a game. When he does run, he's running for about 10 yards a carry. But he's not looking to run as much. They blew out the Rams and they put 40 on the board, and then they really haven't looked great since. I mean, what do you make of Kyler this year? What do you make of the Cardinals this year?
Yeah, it's still, I guess, a work in progress. Now, after the loss last week, people here are just beside themselves, and all of a sudden they're saying, oh, the rebuild isn't working. I mean, before the Washington game, when at least, even though the offense didn't play that well against Detroit, they hung tough against them. The defense played pretty solid, lost by a touchdown. And everyone would say, well, this is looking pretty good. Defense is better than we thought. Then you have a bad game and everybody's ready to jump off a bridge and thinks the sky is falling. And I often point out, hey, this team that the Cardinals are playing this week, the first 2 years of Kyle Shanahan, they were 6-10 and then 4-12, I believe. And so you just got to let it play out sometimes. But the last 2 weeks have been disappointing. There's no doubt about it. And the offense has struggled in that Rams game. After 2 weeks, Larry, the Cardinals were number 1 in the NFL in third down conversions, and they were 3rd or 4th in defense against third downs. Those two numbers have totally flipped in the last 2 games. In fact, in the Detroit game, and the crazy part is the offense have gone down the field and scored a touchdown on the first drive of each game. And then after that, except for the Rams game, it just hasn't followed suit. And in the Detroit game, they did that, had 1 third down conversion in that drive, and then missed their final 8 of the game, and then missed their first 4 against Washington. So at one point, they had 12 consecutive failures on third down. And obviously, there's always a variety of reasons, whether it's with this play doesn't work and you don't move the chains, and then a different one. It's always different guys on different plays, but it's just been very inconsistent the last 2 weeks. And the run defense, which was pretty good the first 2 weeks, has really gotten gotten dominated in the last 2. And they lost their nose tackle, a guy that people say, oh, he only has 4 tackles, right? Justin Jones. And I'm saying, well, how many nose tackles get a lot of tackles? That's not their job, really. Well, he left the game early against Detroit, And since then, the snaps for everybody else has gone out of whack, and they've given up huge rushing yards. So this looks like a matchup that's obviously going to be a very difficult one again. To your first question, Kyler Murray going against the 49ers in that defense, and then trying to figure out a way to stop that offense with Jordan Mason, who's second in the NFL in rushing. So it's hard to be honest, it's hard to come up with a formula, if you will, to say, well, here's what has to happen for the Cardinals to win this game. I mean, we know it has to happen. The question is whether they're good enough to make that happen on a consistent basis on Sunday.
Couple last ones for you, Kyler. What is there? You've been watching him for a while. What's the best way to defend him? I looked at the numbers. I saw that his numbers when he's blitzed are not quite as good as far as completion percentage and yards per attempt as opposed to when he's not blitzed. And the Niners have been dialing up blitzes, Howard. Week 1, it was 9%. Week 2 was 12%. Week 3, it was 20% against the Rams. Last week, they blitzed 33.3% of the time because they've lost Javon Hargrave. What do you think? I mean, is the game plan for the Niners to blitz Murray, and how much success are teams having when they do it?
Yeah, they've had some pretty good success, whether it's a blitz or not, and they've gotten some pressure. And I think defenses are doing some things to keep him from running. You mentioned that earlier, and he only ran one time for 3 yards in the game against Washington. And so they've been trying to go down the field a bit. They tried more against Detroit, and a lot of it didn't work. But again, I think a lot of it, when you're trying to establish that offensive continuity, and it sounds simplistic to say, but when you can't have much rhythm in your offense if you can't convert third downs. And a lot of they've had a few third and tough ones, long ones, but they've also had several that are third and short or third and manageable, and in these last 2 games, and they haven't been able to get them. When you start converting those third downs, well, then you're keeping the ball, you're keeping your defense off the field, obviously, and there's more opportunities to spread the ball around and do some things. Now, one key for them, they didn't have Trey McBride, their tight end, real good tight end last week, and he's going to be good to go. So we'll see how much that means. Marvin Harrison Jr. is doing a nice job. They're still learning each other, Kyler Murray and him. But they've got some pretty good talent on their offense. But bottom line is got to convert those third downs, and if you don't, then that's going to be a real problem, unless you're making a lot of first downs on first or second down.
Last one for you, and awesome catching up with you, Howard. Howard Balzer with us on the UMA guest line. Give me a national perspective, or at least an out of town perspective on Brock Purdy. What do you think of Purdy? I mean, this guy's numbers are amazing. His first 25 games, he's got a 112.6 QB rating. It's the highest QB rating for any quarterback in their first 25 games in the history of this league. You know the history of this league well, so what do you think of Purdy from watching him from afar?
He's just a very good quarterback, and I hate using the words manage the game or system quarterbacks or anything like that. And I hear the debates on different shows. Well, is it really him, or is it the team around him? Well, name me a quarterback that can be consistent week in and week out that doesn't have good players around him. And certainly when you have what the 49ers have, and again, being able to run the ball, it almost seems whoever they put back there at running back is going to be successful. Very good offensive line, skilled players who can make plays, and Purdy is excellent at getting them the ball, very accurate. And when he gets into trouble sometimes is when he has those turnovers, when he'll throw an interception or two, and all of a sudden that turns the game sideways. But he doesn't do that very often. And so he just quote, plays within himself and runs this team very well. The guy now, I was listening to a debate on a local show this week, and they were talking about both he and Kyler Murray. And I said to my wife, actually, as we're driving in the car, I said, how do we think Brock Purdy would be right now with this Cardinals team, and what Kyler Murray would be with this 49ers team? And no one can convince me otherwise that isn't a big part of a quarterback's success. But the narrative usually is it's all on the quarterback, make the team better and all those things. But this isn't high school. I mean, you have to have players in this league to beat other defenses. And I think that and the other part of the 49ers is, as good as they are defensively, they're usually not pressured or feel that, man, we got to score almost every time we touch the ball because, our defense isn't very good. Well, they don't have to worry about that. There's no crime in punting in the NFL if things didn't go well in a certain possession. And so that's complementary team football. And that's what the 49ers obviously have been so good at over this stretch of time with the record that they've had and getting the NFC Championship games and the Super Bowl.
Howard, you're the man. Always awesome to catch up with you. Let me just, in advance, congratulate you. Half a century covering the NFL, and nobody does it as well. You're seriously amazing, and you sound great. I've been following you and your coverage of the Cardinals, doing an amazing job as always. Thanks for jumping on KMBR tonight and chopping it up with me, and we'll do it again maybe later this year when the rematch comes around in the division. Niners Cardinals. Let's do it again. But great to hear your voice, man. Great to see you're doing great things.
So appreciate it. Appreciate the kind words, and great being with you. And anytime, even if it's not a Cardinal week, you just want to talk about what's going on in the league or whatever, you just give me a shout. Love talking ball.
Yeah, we'll do it. Thanks, Howard. Have a great night.
You too. Take care.
There you go. I really appreciate Howard Balzer. He is fantastic. He was covering the NFL draft before Mel Kiper. There's great lineage there and great history there with Howard Balzer. And heck, I remember having him on KMBR in 1997 to talk about the NFL. And here we are. It's 2024, and the guy's still going strong.